I normally talk about rap music or new music, new rock and roll. But listen, I am a 47-year-old guy, and I do have a lot to say about older music. And I want to talk about this lovable man, about Phil Lesh, the bass player for the Grateful Dead, and explain why he is my favorite member of the band and why I'm actually oddly affected by the death of someone who's 84 years old, led a very good and meaningful life. But I want to just praise him in multiple ways, as a person and as a musician. Okay, I'm going to be giving you two songs to listen to. One of them pretty meat and potatoes, the other one a little bit more out there. But let's just sort of get kind of started with a general discussion of what it was like to be a Dead fan in the 90s. So Jerry Garcia died when I was 18 years old, and I somehow managed to really be a part of the Grateful Dead scene just in my teenage years. I was very lucky to have a family that encouraged it, so whenever they came to Boston, I would see every single show when they play at Boston Garden. Or I would go and visit my brother in California, and I would line it up so that I'd go the same time that they were playing at the Oakland Coliseum. So I got to see them 20 times, and I don't mean to be the sort of like, oh, nostalgic, you could never know what it's like, but you could never know what it's like. It was just so awesome. And I'm sure it was better before even then. But I feel sympathy for people, who go out and watch whatever the Dead are now. I saw them. It was good. It was fine. John Mayer's Blues Explosion. It's fine. It's good. It's worth watching. It's exciting. It's a faint copy of something that is absolutely amazing and is totally worth $100 to go and see. Okay, but it was just such an exciting time. And while I was, I never really bought any CDs. I never really bought any records. I did what they would call tape trading. This my handwriting, a teenager Sky. I had over 100 hours of Grateful Dead tapes where you'd sort of get people's names, and their addresses, and you'd send them the list, So I kind of show you what this looks like. In case you don't know, this is a Maxell XL2S. Okay, that's the better kind. The S meant that it was better. This is their performance in '85 at the Rochester War Memorial, where I now go see minor league hockey. I live here. I made my own little designs for the tapes. I would write out. It was this whole exciting thing where I got to be sort of creative, and I'd try to get the best copies possible, and I'd put my name there, and I'd make these trades and tapes. So I was a big deadhead, but I wasn't a hippie. I didn't do drugs. I actually hated hippies. I've hated hippies for most of my life. So this is going somewhere. But if you can understand why, if you can understand how someone can hate hippies, but be a deadhead, that's who I was. It was this kind of contrarian nature in me. I was probably trying to mediate a lot of feelings that I had about my parents. And listen, if you know somebody who's a Gen Xer, somebody who's between the ages of, 40 and 60 right about now, talk to them about how they feel about hippies. It's probably fairly similar. It's probably sort of a push-pull kind of feeling. And as they are all dying now, it's a very emotional thing. And probably that's part of the reason why it hit me so hard. My father died a few years ago, and Phil was born the same year as he was. And I think I was sort of like mediating my anger at my stupid parents' hippie generation and all of their neglect and drug use and all that stuff by appreciating the best of what they could do, the best of what the boomers could do, which is the music. That's the best thing they could do. They couldn't really effectively do most of the changes that they wanted to do, but at least they left us Bob Dylan, the Beatles, and the Grateful Dead. Anyway, so that's where I was. And I have to say, I did see the Dead, whatever they are now, the John Mayer Blues Explosion, at Philadelphia. And it was good, but I was happy that Phil wasn't there. Because if Phil was there, there's a chance I would have been tempted to see it as kind of a Grateful Dead thing, but I really wasn't. So how is it possible? How is it possible that this guy is my favorite member of the Grateful Dead? I will discuss that musically in a second. But first I want to get into it temperamentally. You see, as somebody who is sort of a Grateful Dead fan who's uncomfortable with hippies, the two main members of the Grateful Dead, the main songwriters, the two frontmen, represented two different stages of boomerness. You had Jerry Garcia, who was the crusty, old, never shave, never stop eating Oreos and pudding, never stop indulging, just sort of hedonistic, old, grizzled hippie. And that was like one model that I would see growing up. And then you had Bob Weir, who would be wearing short shorts and was all into health food and super exciting and like energetic and youthful and, you know, into the 80s movement. It's like you could see the 60s turn into the 80s just in the bodies of these two amazing musicians. So it's almost like that Spinal Tap joke where the bass player Derek Smalls compares, you know, one of them to fire, the other to ice, and he, as the bass player, was lukewarm water. That's what I think good bass players are. They're kind of lukewarm water that can help to bind the geniuses around them. And so that's one thing that I liked about him. He was sort of an everyman. Like, you could relate to him. He still felt like a hippie, but also felt like he could be sort of on the other side of it. There's something about him that felt way more approachable. Now, as a drummer, you think that I would like the drummer, but there were two drummers. You know, they were their own dyad, and I had sort of a hard time kind of parsing it out. And I could have gotten into the keyboardists, but, you know, they kept dying. Speaking of Spinal Tap. So that's really what it is. If you think about the Grateful Dead, the three front people are these three people, Jerry, Bobby, and Phil. And maybe it's because I was a contrarian, or maybe it's because, I don't know, but I just always loved Phil the most. Now, of course, he was an amazing bass player. He really, really was. He usually played monstrosities like this that had 6 strings. He could get psychedelic, he could get funky, especially if you listen to a lot of the far out jams they would do, the space jams. He could play chords, he could play individual notes, he could go up high. But the thing about him that I really appreciate is that he was that guy. He was a kind of trained musician who could, if he wanted to, been on the cover of Bass Player magazine every month. You know, he had that kind of skill. But he didn't overplay. He didn't do too much. He always found, in my opinion, the groove. He did maybe a little too much for my taste. I maybe like bass players a little bit simpler, but that was part of his charm. A friend of mine, actually, Joe DeVoe, I went to high school with him. He's now like a session musician and he works on TV shows. He played for Phil in a show in San Francisco and said he was just like the nicest guy, just totally with it, you know, totally prepared, like always there and just working super hard and just a perfect person to work with. So the first song I'm going to suggest you watch, and this is maybe the most meat and potatoes thing, but Estimated Profit from Cornell, 5877. I think I have that tape here. Do I have that tape here? No, I had 100 tapes, but I gave them to my older brother because the truth is, I'm not, like, I only listen to the Dead maybe, I don't know, 10 times a year now, whereas I used to only listen to them. And my older brother, who really got me into the Dead, he's still really into it, so I gave him almost all my tapes. But listen to the song Estimated Profit. If you can't listen to this, listen to any of the shows from May of 1977. You know, the show, I actually used to like 5'9" more than 5'8" because I was a contrarian, but it shows him at his most extreme. This period of time is where he was just doing all of these crazy do just like, you know, absolutely nobody asked him to, but he just starts doing all these crazy like swoops and sways on the bass, and you can hear how much he's in this great kind of funky pocket. Listen to any music from this time and I think you'll hear it. But it's also as a singer. It's also as this great goofball. This image is from, let's see if I remember. I think it's Laguna Seca. It's either Laguna Seca or Shoreline. And it's from, I think, 87 or 88. And it's a picture of Phil Lesh playing. And back in the day, you know, you could just buy postcards from the back of magazines. And I used to have this framed in my room. And I love the spirit. I love that he has the Grateful Dead symbol, you know, the steal your face, but it's a platypus. And in my head, I've always sort of merged together that like his spirit animal was a platypus, like he was a platypus of a, like it makes sense, like Phil the platypus. It sort of all kind of makes, it says it on the back. Phil Lesh at Laguna Seca. There you go. 1988. Good. I thought it was Shoreline, but what the heck. But as a singer, he's fascinating because he barely ever sang. Barely ever sang. So, you know, they played hundreds of shows, and he barely ever sang. I saw 20 concerts, and I probably saw him just sing a couple times. I'm trying to think if I ever saw... Anyway, what most people will do, and most people will tell you, oh, listen to the song Box of Rain, because that's the song he's most famous for singing. I think Fish performed it after he passed in honor. And cool, it's fine. But that's not my Phil song. My Phil song is his cover of Tom Thumb Blues, Just Like Tom Thumb Blues by Bob Dylan. That to me is Phil in his pure essence. That's why I'm sending you to a different performance, Hershey Park, 1985, June 28th. Okay? Click up there. My two older brothers went to this show, and they had a tape of this show, and I used to listen to it. Even though a lot of people don't like their stuff in the 80s, this is my favorite performance of Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, because it is wonderful, glorious, goofy Phil. And he sings this Bob Dylan song, and he's not like a great singer, but that's the thing. You know, they're such a great band. They play so well. They're so well tuned. They're so well timed. They do all these great jams. They're so precise. All Jerry Garcia does is think about music and sound, right? And whatever's in his briefcase. But Phil just sings, and there's something about the way that he sings that is so relatable and so enjoyable, and especially the way he would change these lyrics. So he changed the lyrics. As far as I know, this is the only time the Grateful Dead ever changed the lyrics to any covers that they did. There might be one other. You correct me in the comments, Deadheads, okay? I come in peace. But so he would change, I started off on Burgundy and soon hit the harder stuff. Changed it to I started out on Heineken, but soon hit the harder stuff. He was somebody who, and I hope this is true, had problems with alcoholism but got clean. So like saying he started off on Heineken was like real. Like that's actually his story. Like he took this Bob Dylan song and changed it to Heineken. It sounds like it's a goofy joke, but it's actually serious. It's about his struggles with alcoholism. He's using Bob Dylan's music to express himself and his difficulty with alcoholism. And then he changed the lyric, I'm going back to New York City, to I'm going back to San Anselmo. I do believe I've had enough. Okay? San Anselmo is in Marin County. That is where a lot of the Grateful Dead lived. But he didn't live in San Anselmo. I think he said that for the rhyme. Or maybe he used to live there. But I actually know a lot about Phil Lesh as a human being thanks to my very good friend Dave. My very good friend Dave is one of the most amazing people on earth at meeting famous people. Partly because he pays so much attention that he will meet people who don't get met because he'll be like, yeah, how did you know what DJ Shadow looks like? Okay, why are you trying to get Greil Marcus's autograph? That's the kind of guy Dave is. And he knew I was a Dead fan, so he was always on the lookout for Grateful Dead members. And over the course of time, he got me the autographs of Kreutzmann and Mickey Hart and Bob Weir, who was buying apples at Whole Foods when he got an autograph. How on brand can you be? Okay, that's all here in my little my precious thing. But the first autograph he got me was for Phil Lesh. And I want to tell you that particular story. But that was the first time they met. The first time they met, he gave the autograph, and I'll tell the story in great detail soon. But eventually, they would run into each other. So my friend Dave, you know, he was living above a restaurant in Ross, California. If you don't know Ross, California, it's part of what my brother calls Spandex Valley. It's like every house is $10 million, and every single man and every single woman in every single house owns a $10,000 super bike, and they go bicycling in their spandex with a little click-clack shoes. Okay, that's what it is. And my friend Dave lived in this kind of okay apartment above a restaurant where he would sometimes work, and he would go to this Cafe Marmalade, like every day. And he would see Phil there like several times a week. You know, if he wasn't on tour, he'd see him there several times a week. And he just talked to him, and he said he was like a nice guy, and he was open. And my friend Dave does the smart thing, which is when you meet a famous person, don't talk about what they're famous for, talk about what you know they like. So I had a friend who met Paul Newman and only talked to him about cars and said it was a great thing, you know. Whereas he would just talk about Formula One, because Phil was a big Formula One fan, and so was Dave. And this is the kind of guy Phil is. They would see each other, and they would talk, and they would hang out at Cafe Marmalade. Sometimes they'd see, sometimes he would serve their family at that Italian restaurant. He went on to get an interview with Phil Lesh for the Red Bulletin, and it's to my shame I cannot find my copy. Okay, so my friend Dave was trying to get into Formula One journalism, and his one connection to one famous person was Phil. And Phil sat down and gave an interview about Formula One, and my friend Dave got it published in the official Red Bull magazine that was given out at the Formula One races. You know, that's the kind of guy that he was, that he would go that far out for kind of a random casual acquaintance who was just in town and who was nice to him and who liked to talk about fast cars going vroom vroom. So let's talk about the actual autograph, okay? So my friend Dave got this autograph. This was the first time he ever met Phil. It was in Kent, a town called Kent in Marin County, at Woodlands Market. Okay, you see my friend Dave bought a deli sandwich for $5.49. That would probably be a $12 sandwich now, if not 13, or Kentfield, I guess. I bought some salmon fillet for $5.69, and it is on October 20th, 2004, almost 20 years ago. Outside, he sees Phil Lesh. And Phil just starts talking to him. I mean, how many times must he get approached for autographs? But he just starts talking to this guy. And he says, "Can I get an autograph from my friend? My friend just started grad school. He just started grad school in French." And Phil starts asking him about my studies. Just seeing, hey, I don't know, how's it going? And this is true. At that actual time, okay? At that actual time, I was struggling like hell through this. Du côté de chez Swann by Proust, by Marcel Proust. Okay, I was taking a Proust class and it was very hard. My first semester of grad school, I was getting killed. I had a really hard time understanding this. And Phil Lesh heard this and thought about it, and this is the autograph that he signed. Sky. Rock on. Phil Lesh. More Mallarmé, less Proust. Okay? You want to talk about priceless? Okay? You want to talk about my house is burning down after I save my family? What do I save? More Mallarmé, less Proust? Okay, so this is where I had to spend a little bit of time explaining this joke. Because Mallarmé is an amazingly fascinating figure, an amazingly complex and difficult poet, insanely difficult. And this whole thing makes sense as I'm trying to mediate the Generation X's difficulty with hippies, because in principle, I should be a Proust guy, and eventually I'd become a Proust guy. And I love Proust, and I talk about Proust, I made videos about Proust, Prousty, 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 Proust. And Proust is great, and Proust is modern, but Proust isn't really psychedelic. Whereas Mallarmé is a very early precursor to a lot of psychedelia and just absolutely... I remember going to a conference in Miami, and I was walking around Miami Beach, like literally with this book, trying to understand what the hell he's saying. I'm going to read a translation of one of his poems. "A solitary plume overwhelmed, untouched, that a cap of midnight grazes and encounters... and fixes in crumpled velvet with a somber burst of laughter, that rigid whiteness, derisory, in opposition to the heavens, too much so not to signal closely any bitter prince of the reef, heroically adorned it, indomitable but contained by his petty reason, vile enlightening." That's how it's written out. That's the actual text. It's written out like that. Did that make any sense to you? Sorry about that. Did that make any sense to you? No, it didn't make any sense at all to me either. And I realized as time went on, weirdly enough, my father in his last years of his life got transfixed by that exact poem and bought this book by Howard Block, One Toss of the Dice, because the name of that poem is One Throw of the Dice Will Never Abolish Chance. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. A throw of the dice will never abolish chance. So this is this whole book. My dad tried to get me to read it, but guess what? I didn't read it. I didn't read it because I was still pissed at Mallarmé, because I didn't understand, because I was trying to understand things that were not explainable sufficiently. I was trying to understand things that defied understanding, that defied explanation. Much like you will sometimes see on here. You'll sometimes see here on the tape here. You see there it says drums and space. Space is where the Grateful Dead just play absolutely nonsense noise and weirdness. And that's such an important part of the show, and that's the thing. Me, in my kind of linear thinking, in my Generation X response to the damn boomer hippies and their free love and the doors of perception are doing too much acid, all that stuff, like, I was blocked. Like, the message, less... more Mallarmé, less Proust, is in and of itself a kind of transcendental message to let go of too much linear thinking and appreciate obscurity and not understanding. That's what Phil Lesh said to my friend Dave 20 years ago in Kentfield, California. Okay? And that's the kind of guy that he was. And my friend Dave, I've been texting him. He said he was just a really, really kind and gentle person. And I totally believe it. I totally believe that this is not an act. To close, I'm going to read Mallarmé's poem in honor of Edgar Allan Poe. Why Edgar Allan Poe? Well, because Edgar Allan Poe died in 1877. Mallarmé was active then, and he was asked to write a poem in his honor. And also, there's a reference to Rue Morgue Avenue on Tom Thumb's Blues, and that is an Edgar Allan Poe story. So I sort of see this as being a kind of connection from Poe to Mallarmé to Dylan to Lesh to this right now, from me to you. Okay, I'm going to read this translation by A.S. Klein. It's a fine translation, okay? The problem is Mallarmé is really hard to translate because a lot of the words he chooses are chosen for the way that they sound sometimes in their approximate meaning, not their exact meaning. So it's very hard to translate Mallarmé. It's hard to read Mallarmé. So this is Mallarmé's words about the passing of Proust, which I am turning into my words on Phil Lesh. Such as the last eternity transforms into himself, the poet rouses with two-edged naked sword, his sentry terrified at having ignored, death triumphant in so strange a voice. They, like a spasm of the hydra, hearing the angel, once grant a purer sense to the words of the tribe, loudly proclaimed in it a magic potion, imbibed from some tidal brew black and dishonorable. From soil and hostile cloud, O grief, if our imagination can't carve a bas-relief with which to deck Poe's dazzling sepulchre, calm block fallen here from some dark disaster, let your granite at least mark a boundary forever to dark flights of blasphemy scattered in the future. Less Proust, more Mallarmé, R.I.P. Phil Lesh. There's the camera.